Welcome back to the Adam Kramer Show, where we ask, analyze, and argue about the hottest pro-life topics. Today, I'm here with Kaela. Kaela, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for asking. So I want to start off by hearing a little bit about why you're pro-life.
Sure. So I was born and raised Catholic, so I think just part of being really into my faith has made me pro-life. But I think even more than that, it's personal for me because my mom was pregnant with triplets, and when she found out she was pregnant with 3 babies, she was encouraged to selectively terminate, and she chose life for them. And so today I have my 3 brothers, and I just simply cannot imagine a world without 1 or 2 of them. So I really believe that every life, there's no accidents. You know, God has a purpose and a plan for everyone. So that's why I'm pro-life.
Exactly. And I completely believe with all of that. And that's amazing to hear. And so you're 23, correct? So
Yes.
That's amazing. We've had mostly younger people, but I'm glad to see that we've got college age people on the pro-life side too on the podcast. So today what's the discussion we're bringing up today?
So today we are going to talk about when life begins.
Awesome. And so I'm pretty sure we don't have any question about when life begins, but so I think that the pro-life argument believes, and the pro-life side of things believes that life begins at conception and ends at a natural death.
Yes.
So I do want to talk about, though, all the different arguments that people have for when life begins. So there are so many different pro-choice people who believe different things. There's the whole when they can feel pain. That's an argument. That's when life begins. There's an argument that life begins when the heart starts beating, or the heart, you can hear a heartbeat, or life begins at a certain time period, be it 8 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And there are some people who just simply don't believe that life begins until birth. And so that's what I like to call the location argument. I don't know if I like to call it that, but I think I've heard it called that before. Location argument that, whether or not they're in the womb is the deciding factor of them being alive. And so there are a lot of, I do want to talk about how, there are different ways to argue against those. So just going one by one. So starting with the pain argument that a child is only alive when they're able to feel pain, or that's when you can abort a child. That's when, up until that point, is when you can abort a child. That's just an argument that people have made. So why do you think that is invalid? What, fallacies do you see there?
Sure. So I've heard that, pain sensation is something that's developed by that 20-week point. But I have also heard that that's not set in stone. So it is entirely possible that a baby younger than 20 weeks might be capable of pain. And so I think to put a very particular timestamp on okay, so it's okay to have an abortion until 20 weeks and not afterwards, you're really risking the chance of still causing physical pain to babies. And then I think just to take it a step further, if we're even considering the fact that pain is the deciding factor of why or why not abortion is still an option at that point in time in the pregnancy, that in itself, I think, is validating the fact that we're not talking about removing an organ. We're talking about, ending a person who can feel pain and who has sensation, a developing being.
Right.
So I think that if we're even going to bring pain into the conversation, that in itself is very indicative of the fact that we're dealing with humans here, not just abstract objects or random body matter.
Right. Exactly. And, it's also whether or not they do feel pain or when they will feel pain. And so I don't know if you knew something was going to feel pain later in life, or was, even if you're going to think about that, then let's think about the fact that they could feel joy. If feeling pain is not the only thing, there are good things about the world, And so if they just feel pain and that's the argument, then I think you could say, okay, but one day they're going to experience joy in the world. I think that's a good argument against it. morally, but scientifically and physically, I think that's a good argument that we don't exactly know. We can't pinpoint exactly when they are able to feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
So then moving on to the heartbeat argument. This is the argument that a baby isn't alive until they have a heartbeat, and you can hear the heartbeat in the womb, or like you can see it on the ultrasound. So what do you think is a way to combat that?
Well, I think the first thing to say is, okay, so if that's your stance, if you think that a baby can only be aborted before it has a heartbeat, then are you against every abortion that occurs after that? Because the heartbeat starts at, I think it's between 17 and 20 days.
Mm-hmm.
And some women don't even realize they're pregnant at that point yet. So a vast majority of abortions are occurring when there is already a heartbeat, whether it's detectable or not. So I think that's a really good place to start with those conversations, is if you think it's wrong to have an abortion after the heartbeat, then, do you disagree? Let's talk about like all these abortions that are happening after, because that heartbeat is so early on in the pregnancy.
Exactly. And again, there's the potential for the heartbeat still coming. So even if you detect the pregnancy before the heart starts beating, why is there just like a single time period that distinguishes when you're able to kill that child? It's bizarre. And one day their heart will beat. It's all about the potential, I think. And I don't know how you can say that if one day their heart will beat, how are they not alive until their heart's beating? Right? Like, there are people who, their heartbeat stops, and that's, the deciding factor. And one thing that I did forget about the pain argument, people in a coma, they can't feel pain. Like, their bodies just shut off. So does that mean we have the right to kill them too, because they don't feel pain? Absolutely not.
Yeah,
So
that's a great point.
And then the heartbeat, people, whenever somebody, has a heart attack, their heart stops for a second. And so you see people doing CPR to help them. And, I just don't understand how, we'll do CPR to help them to get their heartbeat going back up, but we don't pronounce them dead yet, right? If their heart stopped, then they're not alive, right? That's what this argument is kind of portraying. That if they don't have a heartbeat, they're not alive. They're not a human being. So I think that's something to look out for as well. And then let's look at the trimesters argument. So like, there are people who will say that the first trimester is okay, the second trimester is okay, and even up to third trimester of a pregnancy is available. Like, you're able to kill them without any, without harming the baby or without it being morally questionable. And so where do you think we could start with arguing against that?
So like, for people who say that third trimester pregnancies are okay to still abort at that point, I would say, this is hard because I think it's wrong during all the trimesters, but typically, at least what I've heard is people who are advocating for access to abortions during the third trimester, they always say that it's only if the health or the life of the mother is in jeopardy. And it's super rare, and so that's why, like, it needs to be legal, because otherwise these women are going to die. And
exactly.
To that, I would say, well, first off, if I do believe, in it is a pro-life belief, that if the mother's life is in danger, we have a right to perform life-saving measures and to save her life first. But if part of that involves, like, the baby needs to come out, performing an abortion during that third trimester takes about 2 days, whereas performing an emergency C-section can be done like same day. I don't want to put a time on it because I don't know the exact time, but it is like hours, probably less than that.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, a late term abortion is not like this speedy emergency thing. It's long. It's literally just, it's a delivery. It's a forced delivery. And it truly is not what needs to be done if the mother is in a life-threatening situation.
Right. And then, if people say that, then, I think that the next step, if they're like, oh, well, only in those conditions, right? Then I think the next step to go is to say, okay, but all other abortions except for that, that's wrong, right? And I think that's where you'll usually get them to be like, well, So I think it's awfully wishy-washy on the third trimester one, especially when there are pro-choicers who will say that third trimester are okay only for dire situations, but with
Yeah. Because actually, sorry, I just
yeah,
thought of this. Anyone who identifies as pro-choice and makes the argument that third trimester abortions are only acceptable under these terms, that in itself really is not pro-choice anymore. Like
no, it's
you've
not.
already put it into a box, and then your conditions for like making it okay under that situation are very like subjective and really not medically or scientifically accurate.
Exactly. And I think it's dangerous to say that it's okay for those situations, and then to be able to say that, then they could. I think that if it's threatening the mother in any situation, then of course that's when the morality is brought into question. But it's very interesting that there are people who will say that, who will put it in a box and make a category. That's also with the rape argument that if it's a child conceived in rape, then it's it's okay. But in other situations, then you could say, okay, but what about those situations where that's not the case? So besides those kinds of cases, is it okay? Right? Are you okay with it just being those? And I think that limiting themselves to that thing is very hard. They can say all these things to make themselves sound better, right? But then if you ask them that question, like I know from experience, like if you ask them that question, they're like, well, not really. No, I think it should be, they'll say that they think it should be, broad and available to all people, all women at least. But so let's analyze, moving into the analyzation section, and see what we can do to, bring word about how, let's analyze how we know that conception is when life starts. So do you want to go ahead and let's hear your pitch for that?
Sure. So conception is the one point, like if you imagine like human development as like a timeline, conception is that one point where before the act of conception, there is just like, sperm and egg. And then after that, we now have this being that is constantly developing, literally every day, developing, becoming larger, becoming more complex. And also at that moment of conception is when the embryo has its own set of DNA. So you now have a whole and unique being that before did not exist, and now it does. And so you can, someone might say, well, no, but it's only like a heartbeat. So say on my imaginary timeline, like here's the heartbeat. Right. But before the heartbeat, even leading up to that, every day there is complex development. And something that's not alive, it would not be developing like that.
Right. Like if you look at a rock, it sure, there's erosion and stuff like that from outside causes, but there's no outside cause from this happening. This child is developing on its own, like a plant would grow, and of course there are outside sources that help, like the mother's nutrition, right? All that helps develop the baby and the mother's health as well. So when you see, when a plant gets watered, it grows. And when it's like put in good soil, it grows. And you can see the stages of development for a seed. Like that's mainstream. That's taught in middle school science classes. And I remember growing lima beans in like 5th grade and seeing all the stages that it goes along. And like, even when it's just starting and it looks like a little seed, it's still a lima bean, we still call it a lima bean. So it's very interesting to see how plants will be, akin to this, and plants don't have heartbeats, but we know they're alive. And,
Hmm.
Apparently, plants don't feel pain, right? That's a vegan argument, right? That plants don't feel pain, but animals do. It's very interesting. It's very interesting that we'll see, you know, people getting upset about trees being cut down, and we know they're alive, but they don't have a heartbeat, or, I guess it's just about what makes it a human being. That's where it gets,
Hmm.
you know, misty and,
Yeah. Well, I think to
sketchy.
that I would say it's not at at 9 months when it comes out, it's not going to be a dog, it's not going to
Right.
be an apple. It's going to be a baby, 100%, you
Right.
know.
And that goes to the location argument where, what changes in the 8 inches between the womb and the outside world? What
Hmm.
changes there? What's the difference? What
Yeah,
occurs
exactly.
between when the child is in the womb and when it's out? Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Crazy.
that in itself is such a, and people might say, oh, well, if it's in the womb, like, it's not viable or something. Well, if you left a baby, to its own devices, unfortunately, it would not be able to survive. Like, even babies, out of the womb are still dependent, and they're still developing, and everything that was happening in the womb, it's a continuation.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so I think that there's so many, flaws to these arguments that we bring up. And if we can convince them that, that own set of DNA from the moment of conception, it's got its own set of DNA. It's separate from the mother. It is not the same thing as the mother. Like that tears down the my body, my choice argument,
Hmm.
where it's, it's the mother's body, but, it's really not, because it's got its own DNA. It's a separate life. And, that can, at that point, it should not be separated from the mother. It is
Hmm.
different, but, you cannot take it away. You shouldn't.
Hmm.
And so, with that, with the argument that, you know, with the whole pain argument, I don't see how you can see a whole new set of DNA and say, okay, well, sure, I guess it's not a life yet. We can kill it, right? There's, it's still that developmental stage.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
and I
yeah, go ahead.
okay. I was gonna say I love that what you said earlier about, well, like someone, some people with different medical conditions, they have compromised sensation. They can't feel everything. Does that make them less of a human? No, absolutely not. So why is it different? Why do we have like a different why does that not apply to the baby in the womb?
Right. Why is there a different standard for a child than for, a grown man? It is still
Hmm.
a human life, and it deserves the
Yeah.
dignity and respect of one. Um, so moving into the argument section here, so you'll be arguing for life, and I'll I'll try to use the various arguments that we listed today. So this will just kind of be like a template for how you can, you know, tear down these arguments that are fallacious and not true. So starting off, I'll just argue from the pro-choice side and say I believe that uh, you know there's not a human life until the point where it can feel pain. It's okay to kill that child until the point of pain. Uh, why do you think differently?
I do not agree with that because uh, the marker for where pain sensation starts is not something that is set in stone. So you cannot with complete certainty um, basically guarantee that having an abortion around that 20 weeks or right before it is going to be a painless experience for the baby. Also, there are humans who have impairments in their pain processing, and we don't, that doesn't give us the right to end their life either. So, pain, that subjective, that feeling, that sensation does not give someone the right to end a life.
Okay, so if not pain, then how about when the heartbeat starts?
Well, the heartbeat, are you aware it starts at 20 days after conception? Because most women don't even realize they're pregnant at that point yet. So you would be saying that
Okay.
every abortion after that is not right?
No, I mean, I think that that would be okay. I mean, if they don't know that they're pregnant, then I guess they still have an option pretty early on. But uh, so, so what? Let's say 3 months. Why is it uh, wrong to kill them at 3 months? Before 3 months, I mean, they don't even look like a human.
Well, looks are something that is constantly evolving, and regardless of what it looks like at any point in time in the pregnancy, when that baby is born, it is going to unmistakably be a baby.
So then, I guess even at 6 weeks, then why is it? I mean, sorry, 6 months. Why is that? Why would that be wrong?
Well, I think any point in time that you, if we're just deciding that everyone can pick and choose at one point, at what point in pregnancy they decide that it's no longer right to have an abortion, um, that is, first off, that's not rooted in science at all. And most embryologists, I over 90%, for sure, I don't know what the exact number is, but over 90% of embryologists believe that life begins at conception. So really, wherever you pick on the timeline from conception to birth, there is an active, developing, complex, unique individual with its own set of DNA that is in there in the womb, and you are ending that by having an abortion, whether it's after 30 days, 3 months, 9 months.
So transitioning then to a pro-choicer who would say, it's not a child until birth. So like why it doesn't, it can't live on its own when it's in the womb. Why it's not different from the mother. So why can't we kill it up until birth? What's the problem with that?
Well, a baby can't live on its own either. I mean, I would even go so far as to say a toddler can't live on their own. So whether they're in the womb or out of the womb, that dependency factor is still very much a part of it. And I think pretty much everyone would agree it'd be wrong to kill a toddler. So why is it wrong to kill the baby just because they are dependent on their mother?
I guess I didn't see it from that way. That was good. You did a very good job about that. It's cool to see how, all the different points we bring up in the earlier episode get brought up again in the argument section.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just like as a final kind of send off here, so how do you think that we're going to be able to, get this mainstream, to get this ideology that, or the truth that life begins at conception? What do you think is the best way to prove that? Because we have, like you said, over 90% of embryologists on our side saying that life begins at conception. How can we, like, why is the party that's telling us to believe the science and follow the science, why are they not following the science? What's going on here?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. I really think that a lot of people just simply do not know these facts. And this aspect of the pro-life argument, this when does life begin, is something that, obviously it's very much rooted in science. And so I think when you can just like share this information with people, I mean, I think for one, that's a huge starting point. And it's, it's hard to like remember every stat and stuff. And I truly don't think you need to have all this memorized to be able to go out and engage in these conversations. Something I kind of do is I just have the number 20 in my head, because heartbeat 20 days and the pain, 20 weeks, roughly. So I think like those are good markers. And then I think just always like whenever someone picks any sort of point during the pregnancy to say, okay, well, it's okay to have an abortion up until this point, I would just kind of put it back on them and say, why? Because the reasoning is usually something that is like still relevant after the baby's born, like that dependence, it's like, well, baby's just as dependent. So yeah, I think kind of those couple of things are what at least has helped me having these conversations with people.
Right. Yes. And that's like the whole goal of this, to be able to help people have these conversations and to be able to, present the truth in a logical way that people can understand. And I think it's really interesting to see how like easy it is to tear down these arguments, because like you could say the whole, plant development argument, especially for like looks, if it's looks, if like, okay, well, it doesn't look like a child until this point. So, let's not kill it until it looks like a human being. A plant doesn't look like a plant when it's a seed. So I think that's a good argument. That's, easy to bring up, and nobody's going to argue that, obviously it's a plant seed, and we understand that, it's an unborn child. It's different, obviously, from a fully grown 9-month-old baby, but it's still a human, right? It's still a plant. A seed is still a plant. So I think that's interesting to say, along with that argument. And then, like you said, with the dependency argument, that's obviously easy to bring up, easy to remember too, just because it's logical. It makes sense. And that's the thing. We have logic on our side. That's the best part about it.
Yeah. Wouldn't be here if we didn't.
Exactly. Or if we didn't know the truth,
Yeah.
It's just incredible to, that we actually have the truth on our side, and we have these facts. I think that listening to people is just another thing that we have to bring up, listening to what other people have to say, because we want them to listen to us. Right. So if somebody has a reason why they're pro-choice, we should listen to it, and we should, respect their opinion and try to see where we can relate to them on how to, convince them, well, not convince them, but, find common ground that, this is a human child when from the moment of conception until a natural death.
Yes. I agree.
Well, thank you very much, Kaela, for coming on the show today. It was lots of fun.
I think
this is a good topic. And the thing is, there's just so much variation on this about when life begins. Like, not only between pro-lifers and pro-choicers, but like even among pro-choicers, there are people who believe differently. Like,
exactly. Yeah. So their platform is really just not very solid.
Right. And it's not unified. Like, I think that if you asked all pro-lifers, they would say, oh, at conception. Like, we all have a solid answer, and we'll all agree with each other. But then you'll see people over there arguing when they feel pain, when they, and I think it is also specific to their case. If they know someone who's had abortion complications and they don't want to admit the fact that, it was wrong, it was a mistake for them to abort their child, I think that's another thing. And that just comes along with listening.
Yeah. Just always good to be sensitive, because you don't know where someone's coming from until they let you know. So.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Kaela. Glad to have you on. Hopefully we can have you some other time.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
I had an episode recap on that as well, where I talked, while slavery and the Holocaust are in their own sort of category of just complete atrocities. Okay, they're like, you can't really compare much to the Holocaust, but that's exactly it. It's not a human, so we can kill it. Oh, it doesn't have value. It can't feel pain. Right. They take away its validity, its personhood, in order to make it easier to kill, or to convince themselves it's easier to kill.
Exactly. And you see this with not only lying, but also with, it's like they make it seem like such a dandy thing. Let's go down to Planned Parenthood and kill my child. It's, have you seen the videos that it's like, I think Planned Parenthood actually released a video about what having an abortion is like the procedure that you go through, like the waiting room.
Yes, I've seen them before. Yeah.
It's sickening. They have like this happy music playing behind it. And, I think that Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire actually reacted to it. And like with movies that are coming out, especially on HBO, they came out with a movie called Unpregnant, and, it's just abortion advertising. It's so disgusting to see this mainstream, but like, Unplanned, it gets an R rating.